As we gear up for the Steelers' first preseason game, I want to talk to Alan Saunders today about the linebacker situation, what Nick Herbig has looked like, and a crammed up defensive line battle for spots on the depth chart. All here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Joining me, as I said before, is Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. He's back with us. We're happy to talk with Alan all the time here. Alan, I want to focus on a specific position for this first segment, and that's the linebacker spots, because we now have three guys, because they brought in Kwon Alexander, who are veterans and are there. Mark Robinson's also, I think, shown improvement this training camp. But the question everyone's going to ask is, what is going to be the pecking order, the depth chart order, that when the season actually begins? Now, the Steelers did release a depth chart recently, and with that depth chart being released, we saw a lot of things that we know probably won't hold up into the season. But with linebacker, it can be a little bit trickier. But for at least the start of things, the starters were Cole Holcomb and Elandon Roberts, and behind them were Kwon Alexander and Mark Robinson. Alan Saunders, does that order hold? Or do you see Kwon Alexander or anyone else making a march up to get a starting spot there for the Steelers?
The answer to that question depends on the time frame that you are holding me to.
By week one.
Well, week one brings in the San Francisco 49ers and Christian McCaffrey. Ooh. So I'm going to take big 5-0 for starting that one 100%. Okay. Because that man can hit. Mm-hmm. Like, I knew he had a reputation as a strong defender of the run, a good tackler. I've seen the stats. I've watched him play some games. When you get up close on the sideline and see how big he is and how explosive he is, I think that's the thing that maybe I didn't see until I really got up close and personal with him, is that he hits hard. And so those games, San Francisco, Tennessee, Vegas, Cleveland, Baltimore, I think we're going to get a lot of Elandon Roberts. I think we're going to get a lot of them. Now,
go ahead.
He coverage, he had a couple good reps. Like, he had a real good win against Jalen Warren yesterday.
He did.
Sunday, I guess. But I think he is going to be very valuable for their run defense. I don't know how much he's going to play against somebody that really likes to spread it out and sling it around. But I think the Steelers' schedule has more column A than column B. I think there are more teams on the schedule this year, that really like to run the ball, and even teams that maybe don't necessarily have like a eye-catching running back like some of the ones I named. Seattle's going to run it a lot. Like, we know what that team's DNA is, right? They run the ball. Like, there's a lot of teams on the schedule that like to run the ball. I think he's going to be really important for that. I do think, though, like, Kwon Alexander is not this, like, pass specialist. Like, he can do everything. Like, I don't want to paint him as a guy that could not be a 3-down linebacker. I just happen to think Elandon Roberts has one thing that he is really good at. And so let the man that you brought in do that thing.
I feel you on that. And we've seen Elandon Roberts get really physical. Him and Jalen Warren are rivals.
Dude, that's been a great matchup through training camp.
I talked a little bit about this on our Sunday episode that I did a bonus episode for, but like, there were like that when they've met up, it hasn't been like Rosie Nix and Vince Williams, but it's been pretty doggone explosive. Like, they've met up, and at one point, Jalen Warren pancaked Elandon Roberts and kind of stood over him, and that's when Mike Tomlin was like, "Hey, don't get us no taunting penalties." But you could tell the physicality was there.
But
But you gotta take your wins when you get them right.
Yeah. I get it, but
that's where I'm at.
That's a win-win too. Like, look, Jalen Warren's a beast. But like, I just think Elandon Roberts is so physical, and like that's what you got him for. Like that's what you want him for. I think they're in a much better position to mix and match than they were last year when they really did not have a lot of faith in any of their guys to do it all. I think now they have some do it all guys, Holcomb and Kwon Alexander, and they got the hammer, right? Like the games you need him, he'll be there. There's a saying in when all you have is the hammer, then every problem, the solution to every problem is just something that needs pounded. I think the Steelers have a more versatile toolbox this year. They've got a couple of different things they can do with the linebacker position. So I think all those guys are going to play a lot. Will we see a nickel of Holcomb and Alexander? I think that's very likely. And nickel is their most used defense. So, I mean, I think he's going to play a lot. I also think we'll probably see Keanu Neal play there some too. That's what my anticipation was coming into training camp. He's obviously been banged up and hasn't played a whole lot, but he's a guy that I think will contribute to that spot as well. And then I think another interesting question is, where do Mark Robinson's snaps come from? Like, I think they trust him to do a little bit more, but that's 3 veteran guys that are ahead of him. He's going to have to really impress to get on the field.
Do you feel this linebacker crew can be difference makers for the Steelers defense this year as it's currently assembled? Not X factor guys, but like they will be guys who Steelers fans can identify with, feel confident about, and won't cost them big games.
I think they will do the last part of that. I think they're good enough to not be a weakness. I'm not sure they can be a strength. But I also think if you look at the defense around them, that they probably don't have to be a strength. Like, look at the front. Look, I mean, if you got Heyward, Watt, Ogunjobi, Highsmith across the front, you got Fitzpatrick and Peterson, and Porter's playing really well. And I don't know that they need their linebackers to be a strength. I think they just need them to not be the kind of black hole they've been for 5 years or so. And I think they'll be able to accomplish that. Like, I really do. I think this group is better. It's deeper. It's more versatile. And I think it's Kwon Alexander's a really good player. Like, I don't know. This is a position where we talk a lot about running back on the offense, where that's a position that's being devalued around the league. And linebacker is almost in the same boat in a lot of ways, where this is a position that, I don't know why a guy like Kwon Alexander is still sitting around a week into training camp available to sign for basically the veteran minimum. Like that's a good player. He's going to do good things for this team. I'm excited. I think it's an exciting group. If you've been very disappointed with the linebacker play the last few years, I'm not sure like there's a Pro Bowler there. I don't think they have that level of talent, but I think they can get there with this unit.
No, I'm right with you. And that's been kind of my take heading into this was like their linebacker group, even before they got Kwon Alexander, I felt like their linebacker group didn't have to be the stars because they have stars on the defensive line. They have stars at edge rusher. They have stars at cornerback. They have stars at safety. They have stars everywhere else on this defense. They just need these guys to not be like liabilities in run defense and not get cooked while they're in coverage. And again, they don't need to be perfect in coverage. They just need to not be so liable that they're leaving guys wide open and the Steelers just look stupid for having them on the field. And I think this group can be that. I think they can do that, and I think they can still make plays because big hits in the holes are big plays. Like if Kwon Alexander, if there's a hole to be met and he stuffs Nick Chubb in a big game against the Browns, that's a game-changing play.
I mean, I think the interesting thing about him is like if you look at his his PFF stats, right? Like it's a weird combination. Right, because he's fast and we know he can cover, right? But if you there are not too many guys that have a combination of a good run defense score and like a bad tackling score. Like I don't I think the problem with him and where this all comes from is like, I think a lot of times when you're this pass oriented safety, you end up in a lot of space. Right. And so like, if I'm a running back and I turn the corner free on your edge and there's poor little Kwon Alexander sitting in like a 10 yards wide zone and he's got to deal with that running back, I don't think he's going to have a very good time of it. But if you put him in the hole where you got a big old nose tackle taking up 2 gaps and he can flow towards the football and accelerate into a tackle, like he can hit. Like it's not like you look at those numbers and you're like, oh, this guy can't tackle. I'm like, no, he can tackle. He's been in situations that tackling is difficult. But I think he's the guy that can kind of do it all. Like I don't see limitations on him the way I will say like Elandon Roberts, where like, okay, if it's the Chargers and it's Austin Eckler, like all right, probably not. Like we got somebody, we need somebody in there that can run with him, right? But like I don't see those limitations on Kwon. I think he's a guy that can do it all. Maybe he's had injury issues, so like maybe like the depth and not asking him to do it all every play will be a good thing for him as well.
Maybe. I want to talk about a guy who some people thought might be an inside linebacker. That's Nick Herbig. We'll talk about him after the break here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. But first, before we do anything else, I want to remind you this show is sponsored by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Looking for a second-year fantasy football wide receiver who can drive your team to big points while he catches on with a new starting quarterback? Then expect a smooth ride when investing into Saints Chris Olave. Olave was dangerous as a number 1 in every capacity as a rookie, and there's no reason to pump on the brakes now that he has Derek Carr throwing to him. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, they have over 122 million parts and accessories available for your vehicle right at your fingertips. You can make sure your ride stays running smoothly with air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it. And they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car because eBay's Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay's Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, want to talk to you about Nick Herbig here. First of all, I did play the clip. I'm not going to replay it again, but I did play the clip on our Monday episode of Broderick Jones talking about how quick Nick Herbig was, and so much so that he dropped an F-bomb that we had to bleep out of the show, which I thought was pretty funny. But he's caught everyone's eye. I think it was really funny. We were all like, oh, dang. Oh, okay, Broderick, that's how you really feel about him? But he's caught everyone's eye so far, and I think it's kind of interesting to see all the people who are noticing him, players and coaches. And Alex Highsmith, I talked to him about a few things. One, Alex Highsmith, always a great guy to talk to, but he gave me his insight on how he feels about it. You all right?
Great dude.
Oh, great. Yes, great. No, yeah, he's great to talk to. And when I asked him about the Georgia players, he gave us some insight there. But listen to his insight on Nick Herbig as well in our talk that I had with him after the Steelers Saturday practice this weekend.
Alex, you faced a lot of new blood as far as blockers this year that's on the team, especially the guys from Georgia, Broderick and Darnell. What have you seen from them and how they've brought themselves to camp?
Yeah, I think day by day they're improving, and so just seeing that, I think coming in, I remember my rookie year, getting adjusted, I think it was just a steady improvement, and so just seeing those steady improvements from those guys has been really cool.
As well as Nick Herbig on your side, Everyone's talking about how quick he's learning the game. Broderick called him a quick MFer earlier today. What is Nick doing that's allowing him to kind of pick up things so
I think
quick?
it's just his get off, Nick came in, he's already had a lot of moves to his repertoire, and so for him, it's his get off, and he's got a little variety of moves that he's able to work on guys, and like you said, you got quickness coming off the edge, and so he's able to give guys trouble.
He's talking. He was telling us how he's asked both you and TJ about moves and just how to work. How does he take on the things that you guys are teaching him?
He's always asking questions. That's the thing I think is so cool. It's like I know for me, my rookie year coming in and just being a sponge and soaking as much information as I could was awesome. So he's doing the same thing, and so I think he's got to he's continuing to get better, and so I'm just excited to continue to see his growth.
Does it feel different being out here and hearing your name called now that you're paid and you know that hey, I've made it, I've got the big second contract?
Yeah, I'm just so glad to be here for another 4 or 5 years, man. It's just truly a blessing. It's the best organization in the NFL, and so to be here for a long time is just a blessing. So I'm just thankful, and I love Steelers. I love Steelers Nation, so it's awesome.
Awesome.
Yes, sir.
So I again, you see what I mean? Alex Highsmith, always a pleasure to talk to there. But Alan, hearing him talk about Nick Herbig and how his willingness to learn, are the Steelers in a position where they could have, like, Marcus Golden was a really important add before the season started. He gave them a veteran edge rusher that made it so that Nick Herbig didn't have to rush up to be their first guy off the bench. But is he in a position where he might be the person you want to be the first person off the bench for the edge rusher, or do you think he still has a bit to go before he's there?
I think the thing that we're starting to see, but I'm not sure I've seen enough of to say that, is how he will handle getting run at. It's when the Steelers are in training camp, right? Like, the offense is working on what the offense needs to work on. It's not attempting to attack the Steelers defense, right? So if the offense needs to work on screen passes today, then they're going to throw 17 screen passes. And it doesn't matter what the defense does against them, they're going to do that. I will be very interested to see, once teams see that they're playing him, if it's Herbig's in the game, all right, double team on the left end. What will happen then? I think that'll be the story about whether he'll be able to hold up to that or not, because we see it occasionally if that's what the offense is trying to do. We haven't seen anybody try to target him in that way. And with his size, I expect that we are going to see that. That's one of the reasons why a lot of people thought he wasn't going to be an edge rusher. The reason that I think he is going to be an edge rusher is that he has great pass rush moves. Man, he has just an awesome repertoire of moves already. Really reminds me of Alex Highsmith when he came out, where it was okay, hello stacks, FCS level. Who knows if that's going to translate? Let's see. And then you're oh, that translates. That. That's nice. That's pretty right there. Okay, I get it. His wins in the pass rush drills have been extreme. He has cleaner wins than TJ. I don't know that he has more wins, but when he beats somebody, he beats them all the way. He's just gone. And so I think his best role for this team this year is situational pass rusher. It's TJ or Alex needs to snap off, and it's first or second down. I think I might be leaning towards Marcus Golden going in there. But if it's third down, I think I'll try to find a way to get Herbig in there. The other thing I've noticed is they drop him in coverage, and he runs really well. If you're talking about a pass down player, I think he fits really well. You get him in third and long when they're not going to run double team runs at him because of the down and distance. I think it takes away all that hesitation, then he can really play. So to me, it's about the situation and how he handles something that we have not even seen yet will determine, how those reps that, and let's be honest, TJ and Alex are going to play a lot. So we're not talking about that many reps to begin with. But, is it going to be 20 a game for Golden and 10 a game for Herbig? Is it going to be 50-50? Might it sometimes flip the other way? We'll see how he handles that pressure of the running game. I think that's the next step for him that we haven't seen. But from what we have seen, he certainly fits. I'll admit, I was a little skeptical of him at the position. I am not anymore. I think he can do it. I don't know if he can be a starter there, but he can certainly be a rotational guy.
And that's where I think that he can be very useful to the Steelers over the next few years, because if you're in a position, imagine last year when TJ Watt was out for a while and they were scrambling. Malik Reed, They had no answer for that. Now you have Alex Highsmith, who's better, and you'd have Golden, and you'd have Herbig. And again, this Herbig is not a guaranteed like, woo, yeah, he's bringing it. But say he does play up to the level that we've seen him in camp, where he's beating guys left and right, and he's able to use that quickness to win matchups and be a disruptive player. If he's able to do that coming off the bench, it gives you the liberty to let guys rest when they're hurt a little bit more, and two, it makes it so that, yeah, sure, TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith are going to be the guys who absolutely are getting most of the snaps in the game, but you're not stressing yourself too much to get them some rest so that they can be fresh for the mid to late fourth quarter, because you're trusting the backups to come in. And that's what the best defensive lines do. That's what the Eagles have been doing with Andy Weidel, because they had such great depth up front that they had Fletcher Cox and they had Hassan Reddick and all these other guys that were lining up all over the place. But the key was they had several components of that, so that there was fresh legs that kept coming at you and coming at you and coming at you. And that's where I think that Herbig can be part of a big thing there. And we'll talk more about that with the defensive line here. But I think Herbig is part of that image that the Steelers are creating.
The Eagles' second team front seven had like Brandon Graham and Ndamukong Suh and Jordan Davis on it. That's absurd. I think I'm not sure the Steelers are there, but I think I like where they're heading. And there's another guy we didn't even talk about yet that figures into this equation too, and that's DeMarvin Leal. He played about half his snaps on the edge last year. He said that's what we're doing again this year. Now, he's been banged up, got his ankle rolled up in a one-on-one drill. Hasn't practiced probably this week. I doubt we'll see him in that first preseason game, but he's a guy that's going to get some snaps there too when they want to go a little bit heavier. And so there's depth there. There is definitely like the most depth there they've had in quite some time.
There certainly is. I want to talk about the depth on the defensive line, though, because that's an interesting conversation. Leal certainly fits into that calculation. We'll talk about that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, let's talk about the defensive line here, because on the depth chart, this is a packed crew. Now, the starters are listed currently as at defensive tackle, Cam Heyward; nose tackle, Montravius Adams; defensive end, Larry Ogunjobi. Now, mind you, defensive tackle is just, they call Cam Heyward that so that he can get more shots at the Pro Bowl, because when he was listed as defensive end, he was going up against real people who are just legitimately edge rushers in 4-3 systems, and that was not favorable to him. But since they moved into defensive tackle, which he really what is, you get my point. So those are your three starters. Behind them, you have Loudermilk at D tackle, Braden Fehoko at nose tackle, DeMarvin Leal at defensive end. Then you have Armin Watts at defensive tackle, Keeanu Benton at your third nose tackle, and Manny Jones at defensive end. You also have Jonathan Marshall and James Nehemiah there on the fourth squad. But the bottom line is, I look at this and I see Keeanu Benton third on this depth chart. And I said this on our Monday episode, that ain't gonna hold. Like that's Mike Tomlin playing cute games. Just trying to Keeanu Benton. He wants Keeanu Benton to look at that and just get red in the face and just want to kill people Friday night and say, like, you better start me or something else like that. But give us your opinion. You watching the defensive line and how they've worked. Who, if you were to pick 6 guys, no, let's go with seven guys that have piqued your interest on the defensive line. Who are those guys?
This is a really hard question to answer, because I think there's been a lot of guys that are really good. Like they're not bad. All the way down to like Jonathan Marshall, who's the 4th team nose tackle on the depth chart. Like, he's had some moments where I'm like, that was impressive. So a couple things here. DeMarvin hasn't been practicing, so there's been more opportunities. And I think of these players, The one that has the two that I think have exceeded my expectations the most are Braden Fehoko and Isaiah Loudermilk.
I agree.
Braden Fehoko, every time there's a big play from a Steelers linebacker, Braden Fehoko is in at nose tackle. I'm not sure he has more than like 2 tackles in a team period. He had one Sunday where he had Ant Mac dead to rights in the backfield, but it wasn't a live period, so he didn't get to blow him up. He just did one of these and said, "I got you," just after McFarland had the ball.
Right.
It was, but like that's to me like going to be a rare thing for him. Like mostly, it's just about absorbing blocks and staying centered in that defense. He's been very impressive. Isaiah Loudermilk is kind of taken on that DeMarvin Leal role since he's been out. Right? Sometimes it's a 5 tech, sometimes it's a stand up 7 tech on the outside, where you think about 5 techs like traditional Steelers 3-4 defensive linemen, right? Like Brett Kiesel, or like a 7 would be more like what Alex Highsmith is, right? He's been kind of fitting in between those two guys. And I think that versatility, and I just think he's played so well. Like he was a guy that if you remember back to when he was drafted, I think was a head scratcher for a lot of people. Like wasn't a position of dire need. They traded up a year to get to him, and he wasn't a guy that was like way at the top of boards. I think you can kind of start to see like what the plan was with him, but now I don't know where he fits because there's so many. Mon Adams is there, Armand Watts is there. Like those are veteran guys that have been around. Might one of them be cut? I don't know, but like they're not going to keep 9. They're probably not going to keep 8. Like it's a very difficult group to whittle down from where they're sitting right now.
It is difficult, and right now, like Braden Fehoko, I'm right with you on this. I talked to Braden Fehoko before training camp back in OTAs, and he is just so excited to be on a physical football team. He's like, everyone wants to throw the ball. I just wish that everything was running because I would just destroy people. And he does. Like he takes up space. He eats up double teams. Whichever linebackers behind him will be clean. That is almost a guarantee when he is out there. And so to me, he's that. But I look at this man, Montravius Adams on the first team. Montravius does have experience. He knows the defense. He's worked with them. But man, I can't help but think Keanu's going to take that spot soon.
I think of those first 3 nose tackles, he has been the least impactful to me.
Right.
Of Fehoko, Benton, and Adams.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the one thing he has that those two guys don't is I think we're seeing more of him play that 3 tech nickel sub-package defensive tackle. Like we haven't seen Keeanu Benton do a lot of that so far. Fehoko probably won't do a lot of that. I think they think that Benton will eventually. But as a rookie, they're probably going to keep him mostly on the nose. So Adams has a little bit more versatility, but man, I think the other 2 guys have made more plays. Certainly I've noticed them more. And then, I think it's very interesting to me that you have the depth chart has Loudermilk ahead of Watts because I think out of flip them based on what I've seen, right? Like based on just what I've seen at practice, like I think Watts has taken more reps with the ones than Loudermilk has. But the other way around makes me think 92's got a spot. So maybe those first 6 in Benton, could they only keep 7? I don't know. I think I don't know. It's tough. It's a really tough cut. Some good players getting cut from that defensive line, 100%.
Yeah, there's going to be some team that's happy to add them to their depth chart, and sort of steal them away from the practice squad. DeMarvin Leal, like you said, we were talking about her earlier, him being, potentially that 5th edge rusher that they could kind of rotate out there to kind of play in that role. And I think that could afford you the extra chance to maybe keep a defensive lineman there so that you can still have his flexibility and still have a full defensive line room, even when you're flexing him out to that extra edge rusher spot there. But I'm right with you. This room is deep. This room is competitive, and they're tough. They've got guys who fit the goon squad mentality that Keeanu Benton mentioned that Mike Tomlin really wanted. And I think that's the bottom line here is that all these guys are physical. We're just going to need to see in these games, they've been good. A lot of these guys have been really good in camp. Does it translate over to opponents? And how quickly does Keeanu Benton's learning curve come about? Because I remember 2014, it took until I want to say mid to late season for Stephon Tuitt to come around and start to get more noticed. And If Keeanu Benton takes that long, it's fine, but I think that they're looking for a little bit more from him early on this season.
Well, I think they're in a good position because I don't think they need it. Like, I think if they had to go into the year with Fehoko and Adams and Armon Watts and say, okay, this is our interior defensive line depth, I think that would be okay. I think they're in a position where he can add to that if he comes along quickly. And if he doesn't, I think that's okay too. You draft big guys for the long term. Big guys have long careers, but a steep learning curve, right? I think, like Cam Heyward, talk about too, Cam Heyward took 2 years to start. Like that's like bigger guys take a longer time to get going, but they have a longer career. So when you think about Ben, you can apply that to Broderick Jones too. Like, I don't think there's a big rush to get him onto the field. If he does it, great. If he doesn't do it, that'll be okay too. They've got other guys there and they can work on him. And so I think they're in a very good position with it. I do think it makes a tough cut, and I'm really going to be watching this group when we go to Tampa and when we go play Buffalo here and then go to Atlanta, because I think they have the potential to be a special unit. Like, you asked about the linebackers, like, oh, could they be? It's like this could be a really good defensive line.
I agree. That's why I wanted to talk about them. I think that they can be special. We'll start to get our first glimpse of that as far as against opponents this Friday when they take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa Bay. He's Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, thanks so much for joining us. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
At @Saunders_PGH on Twitter, at PGH Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com, at PGH Steelers on YouTube, Steelers Afternoon Drive podcast with me and Smitty, and we'll have Carter on eventually whenever we figure out how to make a third box, because like we're not really technical geniuses, but we'll get there, and we'll bring that along. But it's been going good so far, and yeah, that's it. Hey, you know what? A lot of camp fan interactions. Hey, Saunders. I'm like, hey, yeah, what's up? I love you when you're on with Carter. And I'm like, all right. Thanks for that. I know where my fans live, and it's here. So come find me in the other places. Love me there too.
Hey, they will when they see all your great work, because that's why we love having you on the show, because you know what you're talking about. Thanks so much, Alan, for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. And thank you all who shout all of us out, especially when you see Alan. Shout out and remind him that you see him on Locked On Steelers. I love that. I'm playing, but do check out Alan's work. Him and Nick are doing a great job at SteelersNow.com. Awesome team over there. I'm your host, Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Find me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com, covering all things Pitt sports. You can also find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast Monday through Friday. We also, remember, if you give us 5 stars with a positive comment and post that at the same time on Apple Podcasts, you'll get a shout at the end of the show like this person. We've got Marla Murphy, who says we are the new standard, with a 5-star review that says, I thought I had all the Steelers podcasts I need in my life, but I was wrong. This one has become my go-to pod for the team. Great insights and information. And hey, Marla, check out that Afternoon Drive show, because they do some great stuff there as well. But we appreciate you enjoying the show, Marla. We hope that you continue enjoying it all season long. We'll keep it going tomorrow with another episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll see you then.